Well, if we're all set, then let's get into this episode of Kicking Tables. Today we have Delventhal. Is that pronounced correctly? One of the Delve brothers.
Yeah, that's why we shortened it to Delve for the company name. It's one of those long German names. It is Delventhal because
Delventhal.
yeah, the Germans don't believe in THs. But yeah, we hear a lot of pronunciations. It's
That's
fine.
well, Zach. Welcome to Kicking Tables. We're going to talk about your
Thank you.
game that's on Kickstarter right now, Taelmoor,
Yeah.
which is a very interesting concept. But I want you to tell our audience what that's all about. What is Taelmoor?
So Tailmore is it's a little tough to explain because it's a little bit of everything. I think at its heart, it's a lot like a text adventure where you just sort of sit down and you've got this dungeon to explore and sort of some weird puzzles and experimentation. But it's played with a mobile phone app and board game pieces, and it's also co-op. It's with your friends. You can play it solo, but
Okay.
it supports up to 6 players. So you start a scenario. They're 60 to 90 minutes long. It tells one story,
Okay.
or some of them are multi-part scenarios, but they're broken up so you can do sort of one playthrough at a time per week or something like that. And you work through the story, whether it's one of them's a prison escape, one of them's rescuing a kidnapped kid. But you go through. The app will instruct you which pieces to put out. So we
Okay.
have these double-sided modular map
Okay.
tiles, which get reused in a bunch of different scenarios. And we have these awesome standees that our artist Datan drew for us, which will be both monsters and NPCs, depending on the scenarios, and a bunch of items as well. And so you can just sort of go through and explore, experiment. Any game piece is scannable. You can search it, you can interact with it, you can use them on each other.
Okay.
So, for example, you might have lockpicks you can use on a door or something like that.
Oh, I see.
There
So
are
you have
some
to
weirder
scan each
combinations as
each
well.
item as you use it. Is that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a simple thing like searching a barrel, you would just press inspect and then scan the barrel. But for a more complex thing, like if you wanted to combine two items or you wanted to pick a door, like the previous example, you would scan those two targets. First, the one that's the terminology we use is action and target.
Sure.
So the first one's the action and the second one's the target.
So what happens when you scan those two items is the software doing a random roll for you to see if you succeed, or is it sort of an auto succeed? What's going on when you scan those two items? Like lock picking a
Everything
door,
is
for example.
Yeah, everything is auto succeed at this point. We are experimenting a little bit with like different skill sets, but we're going for more of a lighter vibe at this point. So either you're a character, well, it's auto succeed or it's auto fail, I should say. So either you're a character who knows how to pick locks or you're not. So it's less about sort of min-maxing the stats and more about just sort of finding the right puzzle pieces to put together. So in the lockpick example, to stick with that, you'd have to like talk with your party, and one of them would be like, because the backstories aren't necessarily shared with everybody. One would be like, "Oh, I happen to know how to pick locks." That
Okay.
usually goes to the rogue, so it's maybe not that much of a secret.
Right.
But uh, but I happen to know how to pick locks. I've got these lock picks here. We've got a locked door. How about I try that? And you'd be like, "Cool, go for it, rogue." And you'd see if that would be the way to get past that door.
Okay.
That's very cool. Where did you come up with the idea for this? Like, was this something that you sort of had in the background? Or was there like another game that you played that goes, this would really work well doing this? How did you guys come up with
Well,
this?
it was, I mean, Chronicles of Crime was the original inception. When we first played it, I don't know, it must have been 3 years ago now. And, we liked the mystery thing fine, and it was a pretty fun game, and we liked this sort of interaction with the board game pieces, but I definitely felt like you could go a lot further with it.
Yes.
And we definitely gravitate more towards fantasy settings than mystery settings ourselves. So we started kicking the idea around like, okay, well, what would it look like if instead of solving a mystery, you are exploring a dungeon? And so we came up with all these different pieces and the ways in which they would interact. And then a month before our Kickstarter is when Destiny's launched, and we missed Destiny's Kickstarter somehow. So it turns out Lucky Duck was thinking along similar lines to us, though the two games ended up turning out pretty differently. So
No,
I think there's
that's
room
good.
for both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was. We just weren't looking at Kickstarter back in 2019 or whenever, and it's been radio silence since then. So, we're getting towards launching, and then all of a sudden, Destiny's drops, and it's like,
Yeah.
wait, what? And we've been saying like we're the first scan and play dungeon crawler, and but yeah, I think Destiny's looks really cool. I haven't played it, but it does seem, it's competitive, whereas we're cooperative. It's more about the systems, like I said, whereas ours is more about sort of a direct text adventure kind of point and click adventure feel.
Right.
So yeah, I think ultimately they're different games, thankfully.
So are players scanning objects and items individually or as a group? Like, do we each have our phone with us when we're playing?
In terms of devices, you can all share a device, or you can each have your own. Both are supported. You can even mix and match and have like two people sharing a device, and other people with their own. So it's pretty flexible as far as that goes. You each control a character, or if you are playing in solo mode, you would control two characters, because you always need to have at least a little bit of a party. And yeah, they would each have their own skills. And each character has their own turn. So the turns go around, and players are encouraged to discuss, strategize. But ultimately, one person has control of the scanner at any given time. Okay. We actually do mess with that a little bit. Like if you're in dialogue, if you're chatting with an NPC, anyone can say something at any time.
Okay.
But at least when you're exploring, it's one person at a time. And you can, if you need the thief to pick a door, you can pass to them, and let them do their lock picking, and then go back to the regular turn order as well. But yeah, it is that sort of like a pandemic or something where it is cooperative, but everyone has their own actions.
Okay.
What are the characters that you have available? I know you mentioned rogue and cleric. How many different characters are there?
We're launching with 6 characters.
Okay.
And we are going for like some classic fantasy tropes here. We're kind of in love with them. If you see the art, I don't know, maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't. But we have the barbarian, we have the cleric and the rogue, we have the wizard, and the elf and the dwarf. And did I forget anyone? Did I say 6?
So that's interesting that you have 4 classes and 2 races.
Yeah.
So what was why that decision?
Well, we decided pretty early on, once again, we're keeping it a little simpler. There's no min-maxing of stats. So, these sort of classic fantasy species thing, like there's not really a place for them to like have their own stat bonuses or whatever. But we wanted to include them in the game, and we wanted them to have a place. So it made sense for them to be a class. We also it felt like a sort of old school vibe for us, like a gauntlet or a hero quest or something like that, right? Where the dwarf or the elf became their own class, right? Which I don't know. It's sort of hokey and weird, but I kind of like it for that reason. So
I kind of think as the dwarf is the fighter and the elf is a ranger, as if you're going typical, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically the vibe. The dwarf is very tanky, and also has some defensive. So yeah, paladin, fighter sort of character, and then the elf is rangery, long range, sort of jack of all trades. Has a lot of different skills, some magical skills as well.
Yeah.
Which is your favorite?
Wizard.
I was going to tell you what my favorite is already. Wizard.
Yeah.
Now, how does the game change from session to session? Like, if you choose the same story, is it going to be the same game, or is there some randomness going on with the app?
So each of them are a branching narrative, and there are some sort of secrets, Easter eggs, different ways you can achieve the same goal. So we do want to add some replayability that way. But but the main thing here is content. It's a content-driven game. So we aren't really expecting people to want to replay too much. So we're launching with 8 scenarios.
Okay.
We're hoping to increase that depending on how the Kickstarter goes. And then also we can deliver more digitally, right? So depending on the audience, we would love to just continue releasing content for this thing.
Right.
We also, once again, depending on how the Kickstarter goes, we have some ideas for some specifically procedurally generated
Oh,
scenarios.
nice. Okay.
So stay tuned to see how those goes. We have a couple of ideas there that we're pretty excited about. It will depend on stretch goals.
Okay.
But yeah, the scenarios themselves, the main scenarios, are definitely narrative focused.
Okay.
So we don't want them to have a sort of randomized, ad hoc feel to them.
Now, you mentioned some of those scenarios might actually be multi-part, so is there a way to save your character or your progress, or is that even something that you would need to do?
Yep. Yeah. So it happens pretty much automatically.
Okay.
It's a very sort of light, streamlined experience. But yeah, we have some 3-parters now, and your character will continue throughout. There is a light leveling up experience throughout the game. So, you'd probably go through like levels 1 through 3 in the first scenario, and then you'll start at level 3 with the same character, presumably. But there's also nothing stopping you from switching if you wanted to.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not like okay, this is a level 1 character that I'm bringing into scenario 3, and it's not gonna impede you in any way.
Yeah. Yeah, we had talked about creating sort of persistent characters that live on a server somewhere. But that introduces some challenges where, we want as much as possible we don't want you to depend on our server, as much as possible. And so that starts to get a little wonky there. It's something we might think about for a future expansion.
Right.
But for now, the character progression is just limited to those multi-part scenarios.
Awesome.
Okay. So with the app sort of driving the storyline, have you given any thought to having like voice acting for any of the story or NPCs?
Yeah, I'm actually a voice actor, well, an actor in a past life. So there's sort of nothing I want to do more than just like sit down with a mic and record all these lines. Although we could probably hire someone who would do a better job, to be honest. It's been a long time. But no, I think that'd be really great for the solo experience. And so we might think about adding it for that. But it's actually really important to us when we've got lots of people around the table. We want the players to be reading it. Okay. Because it's, even though, usually everyone has their own phone, and the messages are popping up on all of them. So you don't have to read it. But this isn't well, it is possible you can get private messages, but usually they're public information. They go to every phone. Okay. But we don't want this to be a silent reading game. We don't want this to be a phone game where like people bury themselves in their phones and don't interact.
Right.
And so there's actually a rule explicitly in the rule book. If you scan it, you read it. And funny voices are encouraged. And in our playtest, that's actually been really important. That has helped get sort of the group talking and having fun and joking, which is exactly the atmosphere we want.
You bring up something interesting there. So because you're all in the same game, is the so the app is synchronized to each other so that when someone scans something, everyone sees the result of that scan.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So you're not relying on that one person to know what the screen said. Your phone is going to show that too. Okay,
yep,
that's
every
great.
game is synced up. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay.
That's awesome. Do you have any fun stories to tell during playtesting? Did anything weird happen? Any like, even because it's app based, I'd love to know like what kind of glitches did you guys find as you were playtesting? What kind of fun, wacky things happened?
There have been a number of wacky and frustrating things that have happened, ongoing. Right. And we are right now, the app it's a web app. So anybody can just access it through their phone's web browser. And we did that so anyone can try it during the Kickstarter. It's also easier while we're testing, though it will be, to be clear, an iOS Android app when the box actually ships.
Okay.
But anyway, So one thing, which is still at issue, so if you can help track it down, I'd appreciate it. It's kind of a small thing, but it's the weirdest thing. Okay, so when the game starts, characters get backstories.
Okay.
And these backstories are sort of semi-randomly assigned, like lockpicking, for example, goes to a rogue if you have a rogue, but if you need lockpicks to get through the scenario, somebody needs to be able to pick locks, right? So, it'll usually, I think it goes to the elf, if not the rogue, and then if there's no elf, it goes to someone else.
Okay.
Anyway, these things get divvied out. It's kind of a complex system, but it usually works fine. But every so often, it's like 1 out of 20 play tests, and we have no idea why. Like, certain people just don't get backstories.
Oh.
Like they just there's just a paragraph that's like, "Hey, you're in a dungeon," and then like that's it.
That's the
And everyone
backstory.
else- and then all the other backstories go to the other people, and they just get these long pages of text. And so there's just one person like sitting there,
Okay,
like
so
no particularly useful skills,
so
just
that's
hanging out.
easily
with the group.
solved. That's easily solved.
Yeah.
You're in a dungeon because you're a construct.
Hmm.
Backstory complete.
I mean, there you go.
That's it.
Everyone comes from somewhere.
You're just there because you were put there, and you have no backstory. You're just alive.
We'll just have to add a check. Like, if no backstory, is Gollum.
It's
right?
Gollum,
Or just-
exactly.
Or just if no backstories, then that player has to you get into character and create their own backstory.
Oh yeah, make up your own
Ooh.
one.
That's
Have
right.
that make up your own backstory. They can create whatever they want then.
You
and then-
turn the bug into a feature. That's what you do.
Are you a software developer?
I
That's very
absolutely am a software developer.
So tell us a little bit about your campaign. You
Yeah.
must have some stretch goals. Is there anything that you can tease us with any of your fun stretch goals that you might have planned?
Yeah, I guess I have been teasing a little bit. We've got all the basic stuff planned out. Nicer box, nicer pieces. I've talked a little bit about the sort of software things we'd like to do, more
Okay.
scenarios. We do have a couple of specific ideas we've planned out for procedural content, which we think are pretty neat. One will be reasonably easy to implement. The other one will be a lot. That one will be a later stretch goal. But if we can get those down, that would be cool. A miniature
Ooh,
for the party.
nice.
We've avoided miniatures because of like we want to keep costs down. It was really important to us to get a $60 box out the door, but also just there's nowhere really to put a QR code on a miniature.
That's true. On the bottom.
And yeah, but it's like a little small, and it's just it's not the
You're
same
right.
experience. And we want this sort of like pulpy, like Dragon magazine feel to everything, which miniatures don't have.
Back to the roots of true pen and paper RPG.
Yeah. But the party at the base level is just a pawn. And the party doesn't need to have a QR code on it. It's just sort of a marker of where you are. So wouldn't it be amazing if we had some really cool 3D mock-up of, say, 4 of the characters back to back to back that could become a miniature?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Which is maybe
Nice.
something we do have in our back pocket.
That Avengers pose.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. All right. Well, we are at the point of our show where we do our lightning round, where we want to, learn a little bit more about you as a gamer outside of your own game. So we've got some questions. Just lightning round is a board game related. Just first thing that comes to your mind. You ready?
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Game you most want to add to your collection?
Wingspan.
Okay.
I haven't picked that one up yet. It looks great.
Science fiction or fantasy?
Probably science fiction.
Even
I
though
know
he's
it's
making a
weird,
fantasy
even though I'm
game.
making
And
a
this is,
fantasy
this is
a
this is
theme.
something that happens every
Yeah.
single time we sit down with somebody who's making a fantasy game. Science fiction is their
go-to.
answer to this one.
Science fiction. I love it. I like fantasy a lot too.
Yeah.
And obviously I love Taelmoor and I love the world we've built for it. But science fiction's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
All right, Star Wars or Star Trek?
If you had asked me this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I might have said Star Wars, but honestly, I think I'm Star Trek now. Like
Okay.
the recent Star Wars movies are just like so whatever, and it's diluted the brand so much. And Star Trek never pretended to be anything it wasn't, right? It was just fun,
Yes.
dumb fun with like Jean-Luc Picard coming out and like phasers and Star Trek continues to hit that bar.
Yeah. Yeah, the new
All right.
seasons of Star Trek Discovery are incredible. But
Hmm.
you've
I
also
haven't
got The
had a chance to see it.
Mandalorian, which is redeeming Star Wars in more ways
That
than one.
that is a good counter argument.
Yes.
I have loved The
That's why
Mandalorian
that's
very
why a valid answer to that question is both.
Yes,
Mm.
we do accept both on that. That's the only one we accept both
See,
on.
that's the
I sort of
hidden
realize.
that's the hidden answer that we don't give
Uh-huh.
you. Yeah.
All right, zombies or vampires?
Say zombies.
All right.
Yeah.
Favorite childhood game?
Oh. Okay. There was a game I think it was Dragon Magazine, but I'm not even sure about that. It was like in an insert, and it had like a map with an island, and there were cards you played, and I think you controlled different territories. I remember so little about this game except that me and my brothers loved it. Like we played it. I probably for a year afterwards. Silly little game. We built our own sci-fi version of it, with like our own alien races and stuff. Like this powered years worth of creativity for us. Probably when I was like 12, and at the time I hadn't played much of anything beyond like Monopoly. So it was a real light bulb moment, even though it was a simple game of like what board games could be.
It was in the
All right.
Dragon magazine?
I think I see I hesitate because I've looked through Dragon Magazine games and none of the ones I've seen is it. If any of your listeners, the only thing I really remember is there was an island in the middle and the island was like special. It had more points, and like so you really wanted it was like a magic island. Yeah, I don't know. If somebody
Okay.
finds it, I'll be
All right.
overjoyed.
There is a complete list on Wikipedia. Actually, it's on the Board Game Geek wiki where there's all the games listed. So it's got to be one of those.
Yeah, I didn't see it in those. So it
Okay.
might have been a different. I don't know if like Dungeon Magazine was putting out inserts or something like that.
That's
It was
interesting.
definitely in some magazine at the time, back
Awesome.
in the 90s.
Hopefully the internet can do its job and find it for you. All right. Favorite game mechanic?
I mean, I love engine building. I'm sort of someone, whether it's a video game or a board game, if the game like requires a spreadsheet to play properly, then I'm into it. So
Nice.
any sort of engine building game where I can just sort of focus and like get all my pieces in the spot where I really like them and like optimize, and then I'll like look up 20 turns later, realize like there's other people playing and I'm way behind or whatever. But
Right.
like that's my favorite game.
Awesome. All right. Your most recent game purchase?
Let's see. It's actually right here, although it's kind of buried. I haven't had a chance to play it yet. But I got Last Defense
Oh,
pretty
don't-
recently,
I
which
don't know
is
that one.
another. It's another sort of computer integration one. It does it with audio though, so you get like audio instructions that you have to follow.
that's cool.
And so yeah, it's like a zombie defense thing. So I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I'm gonna totally try it out. And yeah, I haven't had a chance yet.
So, pile of shame.
Yeah.
All right. Marvel or DC?
Oh, Marvel.
I
I
mean,
mean, DC takes itself so seriously and just doesn't get there. Like DC has some bright points to be clear, but like it's sort of a Star Trek Star Wars in a way because like Marvel doesn't take itself too seriously. It has fun and
Yes.
and it really succeeds at that level.
and it
you know?
tells good stories that are integrated with each other really well.
Yeah.
So, well, that's pretty much brings us to the end of this episode of Kicking Tables. But before we let you go, Zach, what are your final thoughts? What do you want people to know about Taelmoor, and why should they back this game?
Well, I think Tailmore is a really unique experience. I think if you're somebody who, like me, was playing a lot of text adventures or like MUDs or computer
Mm,
RPGs, and you want to bring friends into that experience, and you want to be able to like physically hold that dungeon you're exploring in your hand, like that's a pretty special experience, and I think we've really nailed it. And so it both feels like old school to me and familiar and also totally new.
right.
And I love the game. I think we've got a special game. You can play it right now. Like I said, there's the demo web app available, so you can decide for yourself. But yeah, I think you should check it out. I think it's a pretty cool game.
Awesome. And Tailmoor, of course, is on Kickstarter right now. Check the links down below and get over there and back it. But Zac, thank you so much for being a guest. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and good luck with the campaign. I hope it goes really well.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy being here. Thanks everybody for listening. Make sure you check out Tailmore on Kickstarter. And if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe to OMG Nexus. Just click that button right below.